While she was cashing the checks, I was quietly closing every door she didn't know existed. I want to be clear about something before I tell you what happened. I am not a vindictive man. I have never been the kind of person who holds grudges or keeps score. 63 years on this earth, and the people who know me, my neighbors on Cranberry Hill Road, the guys I used to work with at the plant, my barber of 20 years, Lou, they would all tell you the same thing. Warren Aldous is a patient man. Warren Aldous gives people the benefit of the doubt. Warren Aldous forgives. I forgave a lot. I forgave more than most men would. But there is a point, and I did not know this point existed until I reached it, where forgiveness stops being a virtue and starts being a choice to let someone destroy you. And when I finally understood that, when I finally saw clearly what my daughter and her husband had been doing to me for 2.5 years, I did not get angry. I did not yell. I did not confront them or threaten them or make speeches. I made phone calls, very quiet, very careful phone calls, and then I waited. My daughter's name is Serena. She is 34 years old. She has her mother's eyes and her mother's laugh, and for a long time she had her mother's kindness too, or at least I believe she did. Her mother, my Lois, passed away from a stroke 9 years ago. It was sudden. It was brutal. And it left me alone in a house that had been built for a family, with a grief that did not shrink no matter how much time passed. Serena was there for me in those first months. She called every day. She drove the 2 hours from Columbus to sit with me on weekends. She helped me go through her mother's things. I held on to that. I held on to it maybe longer than I should have. Her husband, Colt, I never fully trusted. Not from the beginning. There was something about the way he looked at things. The house, the furniture, the garage, like he was estimating value. Like everything I owned was already his in some future he had already mapped out. But Serena loved him, and he was good to her in the ways I could see, so I kept my reservations to myself. They got married 3 years after Lois passed. I paid for the wedding. $38,000 at a venue outside of Dayton with a live band and a menu I didn't understand half of. I did not complain. She was my daughter and I wanted her happy. They moved into an apartment in Columbus and life settled into a routine. I would visit on holidays. They would come to me in the summers. Colt kept talking about a business he wanted to start, event planning or marketing or something that changed slightly every time he brought it up. And I listened politely and never said what I was thinking, which was that he had been talking about starting something for 5 years without starting anything. Then Lois's life insurance came in. I had taken out the policy when we were young and barely thought about it for decades. After the paperwork finally settled, it was $420,000. I put it into a separate savings account at my credit union. I told no one about it except my attorney, a man named Pete, who I had used for 20 years for everything from property taxes to my own will. I was not sure what I was going to do with that money yet. I was thinking about a small foundation in Lois's name. Something for the local library, maybe a scholarship for nursing students at the community college. Because Lois had been a nurse for 30 years and loved every day of it, I should have been faster. I see that now. It started small, the way these things always do. Serena called in January of what I now think of as the first year. Colt's van had broken down and they needed $1,200 to get it running. It was a work van, she said. He was going to lose clients without it. I said yes. Of course I said yes. She was my daughter. In March, their apartment building was raising rent significantly, and they needed first and last for a new place. Could I cover it? Just temporarily, until Colt's business picked up? I said yes. In June, she asked if she could borrow my credit card for a flight to her friend's wedding in Phoenix. She would pay me back at the end of the month. She did not pay me back. I did not say anything. I want you to understand something about the psychology of this, because I have thought about it a great deal since then. When it is your own child, you do not see the pattern the same way you would if a stranger were taking money from you. Each request feels individual. Each one has a reasonable explanation. And threaded through every single one is the memory of who this person was, when they were small, when they needed you, when you were the one they ran to. You are not just responding to the person in front of you. You are responding to every version of them you have ever known. Colt's business never started. By the second year, the calls from Serena had a rhythm I recognized without wanting to name it. She would call on a Thursday or Friday. She would spend the first several minutes asking how I was doing, how my back was holding up, whether I had been to the doctor. Then she would move toward it. There was always a move toward it, a pause, a slight shift in tone, and then the ask. The amounts had grown. $2,000 for a car repair, $4,000 because Colt had a tax issue, $8,000 because they had an opportunity, a real opportunity this time, Dad, not like before, to get in early on a business with a college friend of Colt's. I transferred the money. I am 63 years old, and I transferred the money because she was my daughter, and I loved her, and I did not want to believe what some part of me already knew. The thing that finally broke the surface was not dramatic. It was the Thursday afternoon in February, about 2.5 years after it had all started. I was sitting at my kitchen table, going through my credit union statements. I do this every month, methodical habit from 30 years of keeping the household budget, and I noticed a line item I did not immediately recognize. A transfer of $3,000 from my account to an external account I did not remember authorizing. I looked back through the statements. There were four of them over the previous 8 months. 3,000, 2,500, 4,000, 3,500. All transfers to the same external account number. I sat very still for a long time, then I drove to the credit union. What the manager explained to me, carefully and with visible discomfort, was that someone had signed up for online account access using my personal information and had set up those transfers through the portal. The authorizations had come with correct security answers. My mother's maiden name, the street I grew up on, the name of my first pet. These were not things a stranger would know. I drove home. I sat in Lois's chair in the living room, the one we kept because none of us could stand to move it. I looked at the window for a while. I thought about calling Serena and asking her directly. I thought about what she would say. She would cry. She would have an explanation. She would be sorry. And I would probably believe her, or want to believe her, which in my experience amounts to the same thing. I did not call her. I called Pete instead. Pete had been my attorney long enough to know when I was serious and when I was not. I explained everything over the phone, and then drove to his office the next morning with 2 years of bank statements, a list of every transfer I had made at Serena's request, and the credit union documentation about the unauthorized account access. Pete looked at it all for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "Warren, you know what this is." I said I knew. He said we had options. We could go to the police, we could pursue civil action, or we could do both. But first, he said, we needed to know the full extent of it, because what we had documented was significant, but he wanted to be sure we were seeing the whole picture before we moved. I hired an accountant that Pete recommended. Her name was Sylvia. Actually, not the right name. I want to keep her private. Call her my financial advisor. She went through everything. Every account, every card, every statement going back 3 years. She found the transfers I had already found. She found several others I had not. There was a credit card in my name that had been opened using my social security number, a card I had never applied for, with 11 months of charges on it. Home improvement stores, a furniture retailer, a jewelry store in Columbus. The balance was $19,000. The total damage, once she finished the accounting, was a little over $62,000. Not counting the money I had given voluntarily, which I had simply chosen to give and would never get back. $62,000 stolen from me by my daughter and her husband. I signed the police report on a Monday. I did not tell Serena. Then I did something else. My house on Cranberry Hill Road had been appraised 2 years earlier at $310,000. It was paid off completely. I had owned it outright for 6 years. I also had a rental property on the other side of town, a small duplex that had been in my name since the late 90s, and the credit union savings account with the insurance money, which had grown with interest to $443,000. Pete and I spent the better part of a month restructuring everything. The house on Cranberry Hill went into a trust, not Serena's name, not Colt's. The trust was administered by Pete and named two beneficiaries, Lois's sister, my sister-in-law Bet, who had been kind to me for 30 years, and the community college nursing scholarship I had been thinking about setting up. The duplex was sold to a property management company I had been in quiet contact with. The proceeds and the savings went into a structure Pete organized to protect them from any future legal action. Serena and Colt did not know any of this. They still thought the money was there. They had, in fact, already begun a new approach. Colt had started calling me directly, something he rarely did. He was warm and chatty. He asked about my health. He mentioned casually that they had been looking at houses. A great neighborhood north of Columbus, good schools, for when they had kids, you know how it is. He said they were a little short on the down payment, just temporarily. He wondered if maybe I had some money sitting around that wasn't really doing anything. I told him I would think about it. Then I hung up the phone and sat for a long time in the quiet of my kitchen. I thought about Lois. I thought about how she would have handled this. Lois was softer than me in almost every way, but she had a line, and when something crossed it, you would know. She would have grieved this for the rest of her life, the loss of Serena, as she wanted her to be. I was grieving it too. I want to be honest about that. There is no version of this story where I did not lie awake more than once, thinking about my daughter at 7 years old, at 12, at her high school graduation, at the moment I walked her down the aisle. Those memories do not stop existing just because the present becomes something unrecognizable. But I had already signed the police report. The detective assigned to the case, a woman from the financial crimes unit, thorough and quiet and efficient, kept me updated over the following weeks. She did not tell me everything, but she told me enough. Warrants had been issued. Evidence was being gathered. The credit card fraud was particularly clean, she said. The documentation was very clear. I was home on a Tuesday morning in late April when my phone rang, and it was Serena. Her voice sounded the way it does when she is pretending to be casual. She said she was just calling to check in. She said she and Colt had been thinking about driving up that weekend, maybe having dinner, maybe talking about some things. I said that would be fine. She asked how I was doing. I said I was doing well. There was a pause, and she said, "Dad, are you sure everything is okay? You sound a little different." I told her I was just tired. She said okay. She said she would talk to me soon. She did not come that weekend. I found out later that the warrants had been executed on a Thursday. Colt was arrested at their apartment. Serena was taken in for questioning and later charged as well. They had not yet been indicted when I got the call from a number I did not recognize, and it was Serena crying so hard she could barely speak, saying, Dad, what did you do, Dad? Please." And I listened to her for a minute, and then I said, "I didn't do anything, sweetheart." "You did." I hung up. I am not going to tell you that felt good. I am not going to describe it as satisfying or clean or like anything resolved. It felt like setting down something very heavy that I had been carrying for too long, and finding that my arms still ached where the weight had been. The criminal case proceeded on its timeline, not mine. I testified once in a preliminary hearing. The attorney representing me in the civil action was someone Pete referred me to, a woman with 25 years of financial fraud litigation behind her. She was calm and precise, and she scared me a little, which I took as a good sign. What I will tell you is this. The scholarship at the community college is now established and funded. Lois's name is on the door of the room at the nursing program where the recipients are announced each spring. Bet came with me to the ceremony when they named it. She held my hand the whole time and didn't say much, which was exactly right. The house on Cranberry Hill is still mine to live in during my lifetime. It goes to the trust when I am gone. I still sit in Lois's chair in the evenings. I still look out at the same yard. Sometimes the grief of what happened with Serena hits me sideways at odd moments, when I see a father and daughter at the grocery store, or when something happens that I know she would have found funny, and I reach for my phone before I remember. I do not know what will happen to her and Colt in the end. That is no longer mine to carry. What I know is that I stopped waiting to see if things would get better on their own. I stopped extending the benefit of the doubt past the point where doubt had already been answered, and I stopped confusing love with permission for someone to keep taking from you, keep lying to you, keep treating your grief and your generosity as a resource to extract. Lois used to say that the hardest thing in life is knowing the difference between holding on and holding out. Holding on to the things that matter, holding out hope for the things that might still change. She was wiser than me in most ways. I think she would understand why this time I let go.